Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are located and when you are listening to this talk. My name is Dedeoglu. I am a professor of humanities and social sciences at York University and a researcher at the University of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. I'm also the founder of the Post-Human Lab, so I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to our lab. If you think that your interests, academic as well as research interests, are aligning with ours. Before starting, I would like to thank the organizers of this wonderful event, dear Dr. Supadip Paul and Sukando Das, for their invitation. The title of my talk is Post-Humanist on the Epistemologies of Planetary Security. I am sure there will be parts in my talk that are not clear enough, so please reach out to me via email or website for your questions. I would like to answer and further the conversation with you. Let me continue with the overview of today's talk. Here you can see an overview of my talk. We will continue with a problem definition for sure, and the main purpose of today's talk. I'm mostly focusing on post-humanist accounts of security and try to map those accounts in order to find a comprehensive, holistic view of post-human planetary security. So we will handle some philosophical questions as well as some practical ones for sure, and we will look at the promise of post-human planetary security. And I am planning to end my talk with a thought experiment. The conference title puts an emphasis on transdisciplinary approaches to post-millennial intellectual history, and I will try to position my talk at the intersection of apparently distinct intellectual traditions of security studies and post-humanities. Although security studies scholars and the scholars of post-humanities from different intellectual traditions explore the concept of security through diverse theoretical premises and practical political concerns, security is still an underexamined concept in both circles. In particular, I think the praxis of security still needs a comprehensive focus. As an attempt towards this direction, I have been working on the nexus of security and the post-human for a while. And in today's talk, I will map out post-humanist interpretations of security and discuss various aspects of security on which scholars may or may not agree. For this, I will trace the transdisciplinary effects of the post-human turn in the field of security studies and discuss how the post-humanities may contribute to a comprehensive understanding of planetary security. After unpacking the onto-epistemological criticisms made by interdisciplinary scholars, I will make a case for a post-human planetary security / politics, because I see these two always together, the politics of security and securitization of politics, which goes beyond a post-humanist security approach. In other words, I will argue for a praxis of security that is compatible with the post-human predicament as a spatial compatible, spatiotemporal multiplicity of biological, ecological, technological, and socioeconomic dimensions. The importance of multidisciplinarity for sciences, including social sciences, has been widely accepted. I believe this is true for security studies too. Here I argue that we need not just multidisciplinarity, which means a dialogue between multiple disciplines, but also something I call multi-onto-epistemologicality, a dialogue between multiple onto-epistemologies. And understanding the onto-epistemological turn of posthuman might help us to better understand the world that we aim to secure. In this talk, I will not address, and in general, in my research, I do not address the questions such as how much security and security through which instruments, but ones such as security of whom and what, and through which principles. I seek to focus on the epistemological positions that form the basis of security research, policy, and doctrines. Because first, the scientific research on security as well as on any socio-material phenomena always has a normative character. That means it may be undertaken from various onto-epistemological and methodological perspectives. Second, it is related to specific normative understandings of life and humanity while ignoring others. Of course, it is not an easy task to distinguish the post-human turn from the post-positivist turn and the tendencies related to quantum ontology in the English-speaking international relations and security studies. However, two approaches come to forefront. This is my reading of the security studies / international relations intellectual production. One of these approaches is complex ecology approach, and the other one is quantum approach. And also, there are some critics of it. The studies that explicitly concentrate on post-humanist security depart from ecological concerns and are built upon the criticism of anthropocentrism. This criticism is pertinent to both the human-centered nature of mainstream onto-epistemologies as well as its ethical implications. In this sense, two groups of studies stand out: the works of Erika Kutworth and Stephen Hopton that revisit global politics departing from complexity theory and ecologism. And in the second group, there are studies conducted by a new generation of scholars with a particular interest on security, which I consider myself as part of this group as well. For the scholars in this list, the main motivation can be summarized as ecology and ecosystems should matter more, and ecological security should be reconsidered. The scholars taking a quantum approach, on the other hand, directs their attention to themes such as relationality, plurality, entanglement, and quantum. For these scholars, matter should matter more in the scholarship. Obviously, the questions and themes addressed by these two groups of scholars are not totally different, but just the opposite. They are prioritizing different theoretical and practical concerns, but definitely intersecting and complementing each other in a variety of ways. The first group of works that might be associated with the subject was published in 2011 by Cutworth and Hopton. In their article, the authors criticized both concepts of environmental security and ecological security, but did not name the post-human term. Accordingly, environmental security as a product of dualist thinking, while ecological security overlooks multiple and complex inequalities. Later that year, they published a book titled Post-Human International Relations. With this book, posthumanism has officially become a part of the conversation. Relying on complexity theory and political ecology, Cutworth and Hopton developed the concept of complex ecology to reinterpret international relations from a Latourian perspective. International relations have never been modern. Somewhere else, the authors state that posthumanism refers to decentering the human in their vocabulary. In this sense, they position posthumanism against the anthropocentrism that dominates security studies. So they coin posthumanism as non-anthropocentrism. Relatedly, the non-human is either ignored, as in traditional approaches, or treated as a source of conflict or a threat to humans, as in critical security approaches. Thus, it becomes impossible to evaluate security issues, such as wars, beyond humans. This means that both non-humans and new technologies are ignored in those mainstream analyses. The main purpose of the studies in the second group is to reopen the triad of human, ecology, and security for discussion. Two themes stand out in this discussion: ecocentrism and relationality. Cameron Harrington, for instance, claims that the Anthropocene blurred the distinction between security referent, which means security of whom or what, and security object, which means security against whom or what. And he offers security care as a response to the Anthropocene security environment, departing from the assumption that existence means being in a relationship with others. The author believes being safe means taking care of others. We can care for others at local and global scales, as put by Joan Toronto and Fiona Robinson, at the basis of indigenous knowledges, experiences, and relationship models inspired by researchers such as Carl White and Chris Cuomo, or replacing we with everyone and everything in a posthumanist sense, as emphasized by Maria Puig de la Bella Casa. Harrington considers caring a security approach, obviously. However, the question how we can practice security care is not clear enough. Similarly, Audrey Mitchell develops the concept of mundicide that is based on new materialist ontology. New materialism's major contribution to the study of security is that it enables to focus on planetary conditions and the state of being on the planet instead of the human on it. Following this, Michel offers a new materialist ontology as well as ethics, and extends the ethics of security to contain new categories such as relationality, agency, and subjectivity. The author calls this post-human security ethics and makes an important assertion. Each conceptualization, norm, or activity of security can be seen as a doing of ethics. This approach, reconsidering the security and ethics connection through material relations, agency, and subjectivity, enables to think post-human ethics and security together. Security as ethics is directly related to worldliness and worldly experience. But the author does not totally reject anthropocentrism. Instead, considers anthropos as a component of a living assemblage. In this sense, Mitchell's understanding of security ethics and also onto epistemology appears to be built upon a weak anthropocentric basis, which looks like a critical humanist position rather than a posthumanist one. Caroline Kaltofen makes a similar claim when they state that the discussions on and through the posthuman in the field of international relations and security studies have flourished under speculative and new materialist positions, but mainly remained at the discursive level. Relatedly, the author points out two related issues: the confusion of posthuman critique with the critique of the human or humanism, and the assumption of seeing post-human condition as a contemporary phenomenon. Accordingly, the relevant studies concentrate on the role and status of the human, but do not on the question of becoming in this world. As an attempt to answer this latter question of becoming, the author distinguishes the philosophical and theoretical background of post-human IR from its discursive reflections. She groups the posthumanist or posthumanesque reflections into 6 categories. The first one is the humanist debate on the essence of the human and Marx's critique of, quote, static bourgeois man. Second, Foucault's genealogy and critique of biopolitics beyond, quote, static binaries. Third, the post-structural and postmodern humanist self-critique of isms. Fourth, the contribution of cyborgs as, quote, an ultra-human manifesto. Here it is not clear why the author prefers ultra-human though. Fifth, the debates about and beyond the constructed boundaries between nature and human on the basis of, quote, more than humans and species egalitarianism. And sixth, quote, humans between things and stuff as proposed by object-oriented ontology. According to Kaltofen, the first 5 reflections are not only and fully posthuman, and we can also classify them within critical humanisms. However, object-oriented ontology provides IR scholars with tools to study becoming as a post-human condition, according to the author. The onto-epistemological and ethical condition in which matter and subject-object relations are seen as post-human becomings. Eventually, the author insists that IR requires a more fundamental philosophical commitment and that more works on a post-human interpretation of life are required. Another post-humanist voice to weigh in on international relations comes courtesy of Laurent Zanotti. Zanotti approaches the ethical dilemma in international relations from the perspective of entangled ontologies, which takes into account the quantum physics-based materialist interpretation that Karen Barad had previously put forward in dialogue with Niels Bohr. Understanding how ontological assumptions shape our approach to agency and how they legitimize ethical and political decisions is the author's central concern. While Darderian and Alexander Wendt, recently suggested we need to quantize international relations, which means we need to apply quantum philosophy to it, Zanotti criticizes the quantum ontology proposed by Wendt as disentangled with the matter and being idealist. But I would like to also focus on what posthumanities in general, and specifically the ones related to security conceptualization, may offer. So I believe that we should pay more attention to discussions about security beyond security studies. Posthumanities scholars focus on various themes of security and provide a security approach, what I call posthuman poetics and aesthetics of security. Here I differentiate posthuman planetary security from a posthumanist account of security and define the former as a praxis of security that is compatible with the posthuman predicament. On the one hand, posthuman security reflects a scholarly concern about the transdisciplinary effects of the posthuman turn, and on the other hand, a citizenly concern about the injustices coupled with the posthuman era, which show themselves as environmental racism, climate vulnerabilities, toxicity, surveillance, algorithmic bias, and injustices in all different but interrelated ways. Thus, posthuman security cannot be imagined as a sole extension of post-structural and postmodern critical views on security. And multi-onto epistemological positions with diverse disciplines might help us develop a more comprehensive idea of posthuman planetary security. With this, an alternative account of security can be found in Posthumanities and some of the entries of Posthuman Glossary that was published by Braidotti and Havayola in 2018. For example, Claire Colbrook states in their entry Extinction that if we consider extinction beyond the species fetishism, we can see various forms of existence as the beginning of new worlds and new becomings. Such a posthuman approach to extinction is also meaningful for me for a critical framework of security, especially in terms of answers to the questions of whose security. I also find the warnings that Stephanie Simon makes in the entry SS equals security surveillance equally important for developing a multidimensional conception of posthuman security. Simon states that posthuman dilemmas of security correspond to two different areas of questioning: human knowledge and the problem of control and certainty. Object problem, or the dilemma of subject-object in a security activity, is also the second issue. I think the second warning is consistent with Harrington's notional security care. In addition, a posthuman security framework which takes these warnings into consideration may be helpful to decipher the normative idea of perfect coexistence of and harmony between human and technologies that is propagated by technology companies, particularly by the companies that specifically focus on security and military technologies. The transfer of responsibility from state institutions to citizens and or technocratic decision-making bodies and the increasing vulnerability of citizens against those technologies might be seen as a reflection of this urgent necessity. I agree with Kaltofen that we must distinguish between posthuman security and posthumanist approaches to it. However, I find the classification of posthumanness, which envisages a hierarchy between approaches, problematic. Instead, separating the posthuman being from the posthuman becoming may have more productive results with respect to the concept of posthuman security. In a state of existence where it is no longer possible to accept security as an absence of threat or liberation from threat, we can and should focus on the ability of entities to respond to the posthuman situation in a pluralistic way instead of classifying security approaches according to their degree of posthumanness. In this respect, it's possible to address questions such as, are we posthuman? And is security studies posthumanist? Or can it be posthumanist in both passive objective and active subjective dimensions? On the one hand, yes, we are all posthuman because we are entangled with a posthuman condition of becoming, whether we are aware of it or not. What this means in terms of security is that We are exposed to the risks and threats regardless of our state of awareness about them. I define this as the passive objective dimension of posthuman security. On the other hand, we can also argue that no, we are not all posthumans because we do not all act in accordance with the posthuman condition. In a sense, Donna Haraway's use of cyborg as ironic fate and blasphemy is meaningful here. Patriarchal, racist, and capitalist powers and technologies work in almost dogmatic way to create and reproduce security issues at the planetary scale. And we do not take responsibility in a subjective, active way. We are far from ethical security governance through active objective on epistemological interventions. In other words, we have always been part of posthuman becomings, but we have rarely acted as we are aware of them, following a Lateran turn here. Also, we must admit that the current posthuman condition is quite new. Two definitive features of the new condition are the fourth, maybe fifth, industrial revolution and the sixth, mass extinction and obvious climate change. The new posthuman condition that is reproduced by these two trends, plus the older trends such as colonialism, extractivism, and neoliberalism, must be understood in its complexity and plurality in order to provide a planetary level security framework that aims to secure societies in a sustainable way. While complexity means that we should take the multidimensional spatial temporal factors into consideration, plurality means that we should pay attention, maybe more than ever, to the injustices between the global north and the global south, as well as within those regions. So what could be the promise of posthuman planetary security? The dilemma between is and ought to, which is one of the main dilemmas in security studies, is seen in the efforts of balancing normative discussions and practical developments. These efforts, however, do not reflect on ontological transformations in the field. I am approaching Kaltoffan's criticism here, and show themselves in eclectic proposals. This further causes horizontal expansion in security studies. To prevent this, we should move beyond a critique of anthropocentrism or the emphasis of the relationality of the world, which results in an understanding of non-human as another security referent. For this, it may be useful to pay attention to what is said in critical posthumanities with respect to the concept and practice of security, in addition to two groups of studies that I already mentioned. The posthuman conceptualization of security must promise more than a posthumanistic view of security. This promise is about both making all humans visible in the planet and seeing non-humans and technologies as a part of becoming on Earth. For example, when we start to read biometric surveillance technologies within the framework of posthuman security, at least three interrelated dimensions of the issue will come to the fore. First, as an understanding that goes beyond human centrism is necessary for surveillance technologies to be seen as a physical, biological, technological assemblage. Second, technologies such as biometric surveillance do not affect all people in the same way. As authors like Virginia Eubanks emphasize such technologies are tested first on the most vulnerable populations. Third, technological and ecological dystopia is as much about the past and present as it is about the future. And for some human and non-human communities, live in dystopias every day. In this respect, the post-human understanding of security should provide a framework for the insecurities of vulnerable communities and disadvantaged individuals, humans or non-humans. To summarize, two different goals guide the post-humanist accounts of security: to go beyond the distinction between anthropocentrism and ecocentrism, and second, to go beyond techno-fetishism. I suggest that post-human planetary security can and should merge these two goals in the post-human era and go beyond them. Post-human planetary security falls into the critical side of the traditional critical spectrum and is post-positivist with respect to positivism, post-positivism spectrum. However, post-human security should not be reduced to the subject of a new horizontal expansion in security studies to include new risks and threats. Because the post-human is first and foremost about an onto-epistemological term. With this, post-human security does not manifest itself in security problems, but in our approach to those problems. I believe this is also important for avoiding unnecessary securitization. Post-human planetary security should guide us while searching for comprehensive answers to questions such as what securitization should mean in the bio, geo, and technological context of the Anthropocene. What should be securitized and what should not? And which actors, factors, and forms of relationships should be taken into account in the process of securitization. That means a post-human planetary security position requires an imagination beyond the modernist, isolated, and linear depictions of reality, politics, and security produced on the basis of Cartesian thinking and nation-state practices. Furthermore, post-human planetary security should aim both careful analysis through the themes of agency, subject, object, power, culture, nature, and so on, and to clarify, highlight power relations among the neoliberal markets, governments, and risk technologies. Such a conceptualization may be the departure point towards just, inclusive, and sustainable planetary security. So in this final section, I'm going to present a thought experiment that I believe shows the difference between multidisciplinarity and onto-epistemologicality. This table shows the different scenarios of climate change. The onto-epistemological framework of climate change efforts differ according to occupational groups, and this difference also affects the methods about and views on climate change. Even if we assume that the members of those 18 occupational groups would act with similar ethical concerns, there would be differences in terms of knowledge and ways of knowing. For example, while natural scientists tend to evaluate climate change in the light of empirical data, political analysts may focus on the sanctioning power of policies on climate change. The political activist, on the other hand, worries that enough people do not care about climate change. So, Ebstjorn, Hargens, and Zimmerman, in their integral ecology, describe this situation as integral pluralism. This makes possible a rethinking that can also be useful for planetary security analysis. The question is that if a security analyst were included in the table, what could be said about the representative method and possible views? At first glance, the security analyst's position in the table would be close to the political analyst based on a disciplinary concern. In this respect, the security analyst may analyze the current security strategies with respect to the problem of climate change. Next, they may comment on the effectiveness of security strategies and related policies. The analysis may be done at a local, regional, national, and international scale. The unit of analysis can be the state, the human, the international system, or all members of Earth. Multidisciplinarity reminds us that any security analyst must reflect the complexity of the Anthropocene and listen to the climatologist, the geographer, and the Kenyan farmer to come up with sound strategies. However, the analyst must also pay attention to multiplicity of epistemologies that govern relations, decisions, and actions. So, how we understand and act upon the post-human condition will affect the security research, policy, and doctrine. So, this thought experiment brings us back to the post-human. Two initial meanings of post-human must be taken into consideration. On the one hand, it corresponds to a non-fixed and changing state of human being. On the other hand, it is about the general human condition, which is obviously more than human. As a spatial temporal condition, the post-human can be defined by the blurring of boundaries between physical, digital, and biological. We live in a post-human predicament, obviously, which means our experience has been altered by the evolutionary, technoscientific, and sociocultural disruptions. Of course, different theoretical, philosophical approaches, for instance, anti-humanism, meta-humanism, new materialism, actor network theory, object-oriented ontology, have different explanations about how we should understand this and how we should respond to it. I believe the most important distinction that we should focus on is between the posthumanist and transhumanist accounts of the posthuman. The reason for this is that these two can be used interchangeably, and the term posthuman is sometimes lost in translation while it migrates to a new language. However, there is a clear difference, even a contradiction between transhumanist accounts of the posthuman and posthumanist ones. Transhumanist accounts do not mostly aim to challenge and criticize the human exceptionality and superiority, as well as the socioeconomic conditions created by neoliberal market economies. Applying this critique to the security studies field, I may say the transhumanist version of security would not care injustices among humans and non-humans that much. As an alternative to this, posthumanist accounts of the posthuman relies on the three pillars of evolution, ecology, and technology from a critical position. For posthumanists, the posthuman is an expression of the state of becomings of bodies together and the historical and structural context in which different becomings become possible. As such, the posthuman demonstrates critical, ecological, inclusive, and post-secular characteristics. Such a network-based eco-bio-techno view opens the door to reconsider the assumption of not only the humanist enlightenment thinking, but also Abrahamic religions, which security studies mostly find their roots as well. That's the end of my talk. I hope we will further the conversation through email exchange or in other venues. Please reach out to me for your questions, comments, and thank you.